Hello and welcome to this week's vlog. Cheers to you for being here. What's up? I'm super excited about today's video. We're gonna talk about values and basically if you feel really lost in life, how to make sure that you are following your own compass. But before we do that, I'm home for the holidays, which is super exciting. Beautiful place, love it. Check out this sunset. You guys are probably caught on by this point that I love filming during golden hour because who doesn't? Fantastic lighting. We're sipping on a spindrift, we're feeling good. Yeah, why don't we just get straight into the video? Wow, beautiful. We're looking good. Okay, have you ever put a lot, and I mean a lot, of thought into your values? Your values are the things that are kind of like principles, ideals. They're not opinions, not ideologies. They are what is integral to how you operate as a person. Values are basically your individual beliefs that help you act and motivate and be a certain kind of way. You're probably thinking to yourself, this sounds like a very Stoic idea, and yes, it is, because the Stoics talked a lot about understanding what your values are and living a virtuous life via the following and adherence of those values. This is not just an ancient idea. I think people today especially need to put more time and consideration into what their values are and understanding whether they're actually following them. So the genesis of this video and why this topic is so important to me is because I realized upon reflection that something that I really hold kind of near and dear to my heart and that I think has also helped me a lot in life is being so strong about my values. I am very, very clear on what guides me in life, and it's easy for me to make decisions about what's authentic, what's inauthentic, yes or no. If I encounter a fork in the road, I have a foundation to check in with that has to do with my values. An example of some values might be things like truth, honesty, family, community, health, freedom. You can kind of extrapolate this out to things like free speech or free expression. I would argue though, even though one of my main values is things like free speech, freedom of expression, freedom in general, that they can veer into the territory of ideology, and you do have to be careful there. And that could be a whole separate video. So for now, what I want to focus on is the idea that you want to have a very clear compass that guides you in life. Again, we can argue on the semantics of what exactly defines a value, but I think when we can ask ourselves, does this help me determine whether or not to act in a certain way? That's a strong value. And I'll put on the screen a definition and a lot of examples of different values to help you understand where yours might be. What I realized is that a lot of people in their life feel lost. They feel like they are in this battle between who am I? Is my life a reflection of the person I want to be? Is my life a reflection of the things that actually matter to me? And for many people, because they're not clear on their values and because they are not in integrity, they feel lost, they're in the wrong friend group, they're in the wrong job. They constantly are making decisions out of a betrayal to their values. Possibly because they haven't even thought about their values. And there's this incredible idea and quote that Africa Brooke talks about. Africa Brooke is an incredible writer, a creative consultant. She is really at the forefront of the conversation around self-censorship, free speech, freedom of expression. And she talks about how your values are not really your values unless you're willing to sacrifice something, unless you're willing to lose something over the upholding of your values. They're not really values, they're kind of just nice ideas that, hey, okay, maybe sometimes I tell the truth and others, when it's convenient for me, I don't. And this brings me to why I feel that in the West in particular, we see things like virtue signaling and the performative nature of upholding your ideas merely just for social approval. And this is the epic downfall, I believe, of communities, of individuals when they are putting on a pedestal other people's approval or what other people think over their own virtues and their own values. It's not to say that you can't be open-minded and change them over time, but the point is, a lot of people, A, have not created a compass for themselves, and if they do, it's by the wayside and they basically never follow it. And so the reason why this relates to things like authenticity and expression and your path in life is because if you're very willing to give up the things that are really important to you, you're gonna lose yourself. You're gonna lose sight of the true you. And so that's that journey of peeling back the layers to getting to a point where you have valued the intrinsic over the extrinsic. Those are basically how you tell, am I operating from a place where I am valuing things like material goods, and if my friend group, approves of me, and if society likes me, all the things that are so clearly external motivators. Whereas when we realize that we can be intrinsically motivated, like for example, you tell the truth and you feel good knowing that you have upheld a very important virtue, or you decide to not go to dinner because it's important for you to be with your family. Prime example, today we watched the World Cup final. I was born in Argentina, so I'm half Argentine, half American, and my younger sister is in the middle of finals week, but because family is so important to us, she flew out just for the weekend to come watch the game with us. It's a tiny example, it's a fun one, but you have to ask yourself, would I be willing to make a sacrifice to uphold this value? And if you are not willing to sacrifice something, then it might not really be a value. It's kind of just a convenient thing you do when it works out. And leading life from a place where, I'll do it if it actually just happens to be convenient, I believe will lead to a life where you feel very lost and you feel kind of at the whimsy of whatever's happening in front of you. And the Stoics are very much proponents of, And the Stoics are very much proponents of leading a virtuous life and choosing to follow that compass, right? The more that you self-sacrifice, self-sabotage, self-censor, because you're worried about some external thing, which in the end we know, tying it back to Zen and Buddhism, those things are illusions. Like, they don't hold up. What matters in the end is you and your internal compass and where it's leading you. And if you consistently sacrifice that compass because you want to be perceived a certain way, you want to actualize some material gain, some elusive gain, you lose yourself, because your true self knows that it's important to uphold those values. So if you're feeling kind of imbalanced and lost, then these are a few questions you can consider. Wow, let's take a second to just really absorb this beautiful view. I feel very blessed to be here. So if you're the kind of person that feels a bit lost, like you're in the wrong job, you're in the wrong friend group, basically your life is not an accurate mirror for what you feel inside, what you want to be, for your true self. And this is where you want to do some self-discovery, some self-inquiry, and basically start to ask yourself, where am I making decisions that I have started to prioritize the extrinsic over the intrinsic? These are the two differences between extrinsic and intrinsic. The perfect way to think about it is, are you studying for the math exam to get an A because you get some award or a monetary gain, whatever it is, or are you studying really hard for the math test because you love that journey of studying, you like the feeling of learning something new and accomplishing something? Again, it's really particular to the situation. Ask yourself this: in how many areas of your life are you prioritizing external gains, right, extrinsic motivations, over internal satisfaction? One of the perfect ways to check in with this is meditation is very much about the internal. When we sit and meditate and we visualize things, we are creating our own inner world, and we are understanding the fact that we can create our own scenario, right? When we come across an obstacle and we overcome that by our own means, that feels really good because we did that ourselves, right? Instead of just being in the race for the monetary prize, just being in the race because someone's gonna give you applause. The classic rat race example in the West, that everyone's motivated by greed and money and getting the big house and getting the boat and all the things. Instead, you wanna ask yourself, how much of the time am I doing things for an internal reason? Not a selfish reason, but a reason that is rooted in leading that kind of virtuous life. So you wanna look at things like, what's the reason that I'm in my job? Do I enjoy the work I do every single day? For what reason do I go out on the weekends, right? Did I sacrifice myself and the fact that I wasn't feeling well to go out because I thought people were going to be upset with me? You want to start asking yourself these types of questions so that you can understand where you've maybe fallen off the track. And what's kind of the next level challenge here is just assessing how much you've fallen for that trap of prioritizing what other people are going to think, say, or do. In the last video, I talked a lot about authenticity and creativity, and that we have to overcome our ego in order to be that full, true self. When we're led by the ego, we're thinking all the time about the consequence, what's gonna happen if I do this? Whereas instead, we would say, telling the truth in and of itself is always a good act. Of course, sometimes telling the truth means maybe someone's feelings get hurt. Maybe something is a very difficult thing to hear. That's the classic example of, do we follow the fact that that is virtuous in and of itself by our own means, or do we look at things always by the consequence, always by what happens? And again, this is why you have to sit and think about it deeply, because if one of your values is compassion and to always be kind, you want to think about what that really means in terms of how you act, how you display yourself, all the things. I think the main thing here of what is important to consider is how quickly you're willing to disregard what's important to you. How often are you self-sacrificing, self-sabotaging, self-censoring because of some external factor that is really not true to you, right? There is nuance, there's complexity, there are specific scenarios, context is very important, but how often in your life are you doing that? I would venture to say a lot of people think much more about the external than the internal. And it gets tricky because down the line, you end up being in that job, that friend group, that entire lifestyle that is not true to you. It's not the true self. So if you peel back the layers and you look at what is simple and what is true and what you really, really value, just think about what brings you happiness, what brings you joy, what makes you feel like you are doing something good, right? In a different video, we can talk about the nuances of whether good and bad exist. But I would say, for now, we can borrow from the Stoics to understand this idea. A perfect way to capture this is Marcus Aurelius. He talked all the time about values, what is good. There's this famous quote from him that's about, don't talk about what is good, just be a good person, right? This is like the classic epitome of the West and of how divided we are as we spend all this time talking about and philosophizing about what is actually a good person instead of just going out and being one. So he says, when you need encouragement, think of the qualities the people around you have. This one's energy, that one's modesty, another's generosity, and so on. Nothing is as encouraging as when virtues are visibly embodied in the people around us, when we're practically showered with them. It's good to keep this in mind. So the point is, if you're having trouble and you don't know where to start, you can just think about the people around you and what you admire. I guarantee you'll start to gather things like, I love that person so much because they tell the truth. They're always there for me as a friend. They care so much about their family. They're always in nature and they're thinking about the connectedness of all things and they embody that. The point is, your values are just ideas in your head until you take the time to embody them. And the route to embodying them is making decisions in your life that are led from those values instead of just disregarding them whenever it's convenient. And of course, a classic from Epictetus is, to live a life of virtue, you have to become consistent, even when it isn't convenient, comfortable, or easy. Again, if you're not going to sacrifice anything, it's not a value, it's just an idea. And I will leave you with this final one from Epictetus, which is, to live a life of virtue, match up your thoughts, words, and deeds. It's pretty simple. If you just ask yourself, do my thoughts, do my ideals, do my values, the things that matter to me, match up with the physical manifestation of my life? Are the people around me, as the things I do, are the actions I take, are those a reflection of the person I want to be? And if they're not, your job is to think about how to get there and make your goal the embodiment of those values so they don't just stay ideas in your head. And last thing I'll say, of course, is if this is something you need more support on, if you feel like you are really lost with your values, I have created a 3-part self-guided course that blends Zen and Stoicism together so you can find your values. There's an entire section dedicated to working through your extrinsic versus intrinsic motivators. Check out the course in the link in my description. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below if this resonates or if you have any questions. I will talk to you guys next time.